The cryopod hit atmosphere like a meteor, and Daniel Ross woke up to the worst headache of his life. Red lights flashed everywhere inside the tiny capsule. The safety harness dug into his chest as the pod spun wildly through clouds that looked wrong, too green and thick. His last memory was the prison riot, people screaming, something exploding near the cryo bay. Now, he was falling. The impact came hard. Metal shrieked and tore. Daniel's head snapped forward despite the harness. Then everything went dark. When he opened his eyes again, steam hissed from cracks in the pod walls. The hatch had buckled, but not completely sealed, letting in air that smelled like copper and rotting flowers. Daniel coughed and tasted blood. His tongue found a cut inside his cheek. He fumbled with the harness release, fingers clumsy and shaking. The harness clicked open. Daniel pushed against the damaged hatch. It resisted, then gave way with a metallic groan. He half fell, half crawled out onto rocky ground covered in purple moss that squelched under his hands. The sky above was orange, streaked with green clouds. Two suns hung at different angles, one larger in red, the other smaller in yellow. The air felt thick and humid, like breathing in a greenhouse. Daniel stood on wobbly legs and looked around. Twisted trees with black bark and blue leaves surrounded the crash site. The pod had carved a long trench through the moss and torn up chunks of rock. Smoke rose from the pod's rear section. Nothing looked familiar. Nothing looked even remotely like any planet he had seen during his years hauling freight. Daniel climbed back into the wreckage and searched for supplies. The standard prisoner transport kit was still strapped to the wall, somehow intact. He pulled it free and checked the contents. 3 days of ration bars, a water reclamation bottle, basic first aid, a multi-tool note bigger than his palm, and an emergency beacon. He pressed the beacon's activation button. Nothing happened. The small screen stayed dark. Daniel shook it, pressed again, then pried open the back panel with a multi-tool. The power cell had cracked during impact. Dead. Completely dead. He sat down hard on a piece of debris. The reality settled over him like cold water. He was alone on an unknown planet with 3 days of food, no working beacon, and wearing nothing but a thin gray prison jumpsuit and soft boots meant for climate-controlled ships that a sound made him freeze. Something large moved through the trees to his left. Branches cracked. The ground vibrated slightly with heavy footsteps. Daniel stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. Through gaps in the dark trunks, he saw something massive pass by. It walked on 4 thick legs, each one as wide as Daniel's entire body. The creature's hide looked like stone, gray and plated. He couldn't see its head from this angle, only its enormous bulk. The creature paused. Daniel's heart hammered. Then it moved on, footsteps fading into the distance. Daniel waited 5 full minutes before moving again. He needed shelter before dark. The suns were already dropping toward the horizon, and he had no idea how long night lasted here or what came out when darkness fell. He gathered what he could carry. The ration bars went into his jumpsuit pockets. The water bottle clipped to his belt. The first aid kit was small enough to stuff in another pocket. The multi-tool went into his hand. It wasn't much of a weapon, but the blade was sharp and the screwdriver end could punch if needed. Daniel spotted a rocky outcrop about 200 meters away, up a slight slope. Dark openings suggested caves or at least overhangs. He started walking, testing each step. The purple moss was slippery. Twice he nearly fell. The climb took longer than expected. His muscles felt weak from cryo sleep, and the thick air made him breathe harder than normal. By the time he reached the rocks, sweat soaked his jumpsuit. The smaller sun had already set, and the red one touched the horizon. The nearest opening was barely large enough to squeeze through. Daniel got on his hands and knees and crawled inside. The cave widened after a few meters into a space about the size of his old freight hauler's sleeping quarters. The ceiling was low but manageable. Most importantly, the back wall was solid with no other passages where something could sneak up behind him. Daniel sat with his back against the rear wall, facing the entrance. He ate 1 ration bar slowly, making it last. The taste was artificial and chalky, but his stomach had been empty since before cryo sleep. The water bottle had a built-in filter, supposedly good for most planetary water sources. He would need to find water tomorrow as darkness fell outside. The cave mouth framed a view of the alien forest. The black trees became shadows against the deepening orange sky. Then something changed. The moss started glowing. Soft blue-green light spread across the forest floor like someone had scattered luminescent paint. The trees themselves began to shimmer with tiny points of light like stars caught in bark. It was beautiful. It was also terrifying because Daniel could now see shapes moving between trees. Large shapes, multiple creatures hunting or patrolling or doing whatever nighttime predators did on this world. Point one came close to his cave. Daniel pressed himself against the back wall, not daring to breathe. The creature's head appeared in the entrance, briefly silhouetted. It had too many eyes, reflecting the blue-green glow. A long snout with teeth that gleamed. Then it moved on. Daniel didn't sleep that first night. He sat in the dark cave, multi-tool gripped in his hand, watching the glowing forest and the shadows that moved through it. His mind kept circling back to one terrible thought. The prison transport crew thought he was dead. Nobody was coming to look for him, and he had no idea where he was or how to survive here beyond the next 3 days. Welcome to your new home, he thought bitterly. Try not to die. 3 weeks changed everything. Daniel crouched beside a stream that bubbled up from underground, filling his water bottle for the 3rd time that day. The water here ran clear over smooth stones, but it had a metallic tang that would kill most species he had met during his freight hauling days. For him, it just tasted like the bore water from his childhood in the Australian outback. Unpleasant, but survivable, that he had learned so much in 21 days. The acidic rain fell every afternoon like clockwork, so he built a shelter extension from broad leaves coated in resin from the black trees. The resin burned his hands at first until he figured out to wrap them in moss. The purple moss was edible if you boiled it, though it tasted like dirt and pepper. Better than starving. The ration bars ran out on day 4. Daniel spent day 5 desperately hungry, searching for anything he recognized as food. He found mushrooms growing on fallen logs, white with red spots. Beautiful and almost certainly poisonous. But he was so hungry his hands shook. So he did what his grandfather taught him for outback survival. He rubbed a tiny piece on his inner wrist and waited. No reaction. He touched it to his lip. Nothing. He put a small piece on his tongue and spat it out after 10 seconds. Still nothing. He waited 6 hours, then ate a piece the size of his thumbnail. His stomach cramped for an hour, but he didn't die. The next day, he ate more. By day 7, mushrooms were part of his regular diet. The root systems of the blue leaf trees grew in thick tangles near the surface. Daniel dug them up with a flat rock and his multi-tool. The roots were fibrous and tough, but roasting them over fire made them almost pleasant. High in something like starch, they filled his belly and gave him energy. Fire had been tricky. His multi-tool could create sparks, but everything here was damp. He tried for 2 days before finding dry fungus inside hollow tree trunks. The fungus caught spark easily and burned slow and hot. Daniel kept a fire going constantly in his cave, feeding it carefully, never letting it die completely. He mapped the territory by necessity. The massive stone-plated creatures were herbivores, he discovered. They stripped leaves from trees and ignored him completely. But other things hunted. Pack hunters with 6 legs and crystalline spines ran through the forest at dawn and dusk. They worked together, cornering prey against rocks or water. Daniel learned their patterns, learned when to hide and when to move. The stream became his lifeline. Fish lived in the deeper pools, if you could call them fish. They had scales and fins, but also small legs they used to crawl over rocks. Daniel fashioned a spear from a straight branch and a sharp stone, lashed together with strips of bark. His first dozen attempts at spearing fish failed completely, but hunger made him persistent. Eventually, he learned to account for water refraction, to stay still until they came close, to strike fast. Cooked fish became his main protein source. He ate everything, even the crunchy legs. Wasting food was not an option. Daniel's body changed. His soft freight hauler physique hardened into lean muscle. His hands developed calluses thick as leather. The harsh sunlight tanned his skin dark, and his hair grew long and tangled. He looked nothing like the man who crawled from the crash pod that on day 19, Daniel realized he was being watched. That IT started as a feeling, that crawling sensation between his shoulder blades. He would turn quickly and catch movement in the peripheral vision. Something large, keeping pace with him through the trees. At first he thought it was the pack hunters, but they never stalked alone. This was a single creature. Daniel saw it clearly on day 20. He was checking his fish traps near the stream when he looked up and froze. On the opposite bank, partially hidden by blue foliage, stood a predator unlike anything he had encountered before. That it was roughly the size of a large bear from Earth. 6 powerful legs ending in claws that left deep gouges in the bank. Its body was covered in overlapping scales that shimmered between gray and dark blue. The head was broad with a short snout, and when it opened its mouth slightly, Daniel saw rows of crystalline teeth that caught the light like diamonds. They stared at each other across 10 meters of flowing water. Daniel's hand slowly reached for his spear. The creature's eyes followed the movement. Those eyes were intelligent, calculating. Not the blank stare of a simple predator, but something more. Then it turned and walked away, powerful legs moving with surprising grace. Daniel stood there for 5 full minutes, heart pounding. That creature could have killed him easily. It was big enough, fast enough, clearly strong enough. But it chose not to. Why? The next day, it appeared again. Daniel was roasting fish at his cave entrance when he spotted it lying on a sun-warmed rock about 30 meters away. Just lying there like an enormous cat, soaking up heat from the red sun. Daniel watched it for an hour. It watched him back occasionally, but mostly seemed content to bask. That on day 22, Daniel made a decision that was either very smart or completely insane. After eating his portion of fish, he took the leftover bones and scraps and walked to a point between his cave and the rock where the creature liked to sun itself. He placed the scraps on a flat stone, then backed away to his cave. The creature arrived an hour later. It sniffed the scraps, looked toward Daniel's cave for a long moment, then ate them. Not frantically like a starving animal, but deliberately. When finished, it looked at Daniel again. He could swear the thing nodded slightly before walking away. That evening, heavy rain fell earlier than usual. Daniel sat in his cave entrance, watching water pour down in sheets. Movement caught his eye. The creature was trotting through the rain, something large in its jaws. It dropped the carcass about 20 meters from his cave, then retreated to shelter under a rocky overhang. Daniel waited until the rain lessened, then went to investigate. The carcass was one of the 6-legged pack hunters, freshly killed, still warm. More meat than Daniel could eat in 3 days. That he looked toward the overhang. The creature watched him from the shadows. Daniel raised his hand slowly, palm out. A gesture of thanks, though he had no idea if it meant anything to the creature. The creature blinked slowly. Then it settled down, massive head resting on its front legs. Daniel dragged the carcass to his cave and began the work of butchering it with his multi-tool. As he worked, he kept glancing at the creature under the overhang. It remained there, apparently in no hurry to leave. For the first time since crashing on this planet, Daniel smiled. He was still alone in the technical sense, but maybe not completely alone after all. Daniel started calling the creature Brick after watching it spend an entire afternoon lying motionless on its favorite sun-warmed rock. It had the same energy as a brick wall, solid and unmovable, content to simply exist in the warmth. Brick visited every day now. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes at dusk, occasionally in the middle of the day when the suns were highest. The pattern became routine. Daniel would share food, Brick would sometimes bring kills, and they would coexist in comfortable silence. Daniel talked to Brick constantly, keeping his voice low and steady. He had no idea if Brick understood words, but tones seemed to matter. The creature's scales would lighten slightly when Daniel spoke calmly, darken when he was 10.2 months into this strange friendship. Everything changed. Daniel was checking his fish traps downstream from his usual spot, exploring a new area where the water pooled deeper. Brick had not shown up that morning, which was unusual but not alarming. The creature came and went on its own schedule. The attack came without warning. Something slammed into Daniel from behind, driving him face first into the shallow water. Claws raked across his back. He rolled desperately, got a glimpse of his attacker. Not one of the six-legged pack hunters. Something different. Longer, lower to the ground, with a segmented body like an enormous centipede covered in bony plates. Its head was mostly mouth, filled with inward-curving teeth designed to grip and tear. Daniel kicked hard, catching it under what passed for a chin. The creature hissed and backed up 2 steps. Daniel scrambled to his feet, reaching for his spear. His hand closed on empty air. The spear was back at his cave. Stupid. So incredibly stupid to go exploring without it. The creature lunged again. Daniel dodged left, but 2 more of them emerged from the undergrowth. Pack hunters, after all, just a different species. They spread out, flanking him. Daniel backed toward the stream, but that put him in knee-deep water. Slower movement. Worse footing. The first one fainted. Daniel flinched right. The second one struck from that side, jaws snapping shut on his forearm. Pain exploded up his arm. He punched it repeatedly with his free hand, useless blows against armored plates. The third creature moved in for his legs. Then Brick arrived like a landslide given teeth. The massive predator crashed through the undergrowth with a roar that made Daniel's bones vibrate. Brick hit the creature attached to Daniel's arm with the force of a freight hauler, sending it flying into a tree trunk with a crack that might have been wood or bones. The creature dropped, twitched once, and went still. The other 2 immediately turned toward Brick. These things were clearly stupid or desperate because they attacked without hesitation. Brick was 3 times their size and built like a tank. The fight was brutal and short. Brick's jaws closed on one attacker's segmented body and shook hard. The creature came apart in sections. The last one tried to run. Brick's clawed front leg caught it mid-flight and pinned it to the ground. One bite to the head ended it. Daniel stood in the stream, bleeding and shaking, watching Brick systematically check each body to make sure they were dead. When satisfied, Brick turned to Daniel and made a low rumbling sound. "I'm okay," Daniel said, though he absolutely was not okay. His forearm was badly torn, blood running down to drip into the stream. His back burned from the claw wounds. Shock was setting in, making his legs weak. Brick approached slowly and lowered its massive head to sniff Daniel's wounded arm. The hot breath made Daniel wince. Then Brick did something unexpected. It opened its mouth and very gently gripped Daniel's forearm between its teeth. Not biting, just holding. Daniel felt the pressure, but no pain from the teeth themselves. "What are you doing?" Daniel whispered. Brick released his arm and made that rumbling sound again. Then it lowered itself to the ground in a clear invitation. Daniel understood. He was losing blood and going into shock. He could not make it back to his cave alone. Brick was offering transport. Climbing on a Brick's back took effort. Daniel's hands were shaking badly, but he managed to pull himself up and grip the ridge where Brick's neck met its shoulders. The scales were rough under his hands, providing decent grip. Brick stood carefully and began walking. The gait was surprisingly smooth for such a large creature. Daniel held on, pressing his wounded arm against his chest to slow the bleeding. The world started to blur around the edges that he came back to awareness in his cave. The fire was burning. How long had he been out? Brick lay near the entrance, watching him with those intelligent eyes. Daniel's arm had stopped bleeding, though it looked terrible. His first aid kit was beside him, opened. With shaking hands, Daniel cleaned the wound as best he could with water from his bottle. The antiseptic wipes from the kit stung like fire. He used all 4 of them. Then came the bandages, wrapped tight to keep pressure on the tears. His back he couldn't reach properly, but he did what he could. The injuries would get infected. Probably. Almost certainly. He had no antibiotics. But he had survived this long by being stubborn and lucky. Maybe both would hold out a bit longer. Brick made a questioning rumble. "I'll live," Daniel said. "Thanks to you." He pulled himself closer to the fire, exhausted. Brick watched him for another minute, then stood and walked to the cave entrance. Daniel thought it was leaving. Instead, Brick laid down across the entrance, effectively blocking anything else from getting in. A living, breathing security system, Daniel laughed weakly. Good boy, Brick. Good boy. The days that followed were hard. Fever set in on day 2. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to find Brick still at the entrance, sometimes finding fresh kills deposited nearby, sometimes waking to Brick lying beside him with body heat that helped fight the chills. The fever broke on day 5. Daniel woke clear-headed for the first time, desperately thirsty. His water bottle was empty. He tried to stand and nearly fell. Brick was there immediately, pressing against his side for support. Need water, Daniel croaked. Brick rumbled and very carefully gripped the back of Daniel's jumpsuit in its teeth. It half-carried, half-dragged Daniel to the stream. Daniel collapsed at the water's edge and drank directly, too tired to care about filtering. The cold water was the best thing he had ever tasted. When he finally stopped drinking, he looked at Brick. The creature had a wound on its shoulder from the fight, a tear in the scales that wept clear fluid. It had been injured protecting him, and Daniel had been too sick to notice. Come here, Daniel said softly. Let me see. Brick moved closer with obvious reluctance. Daniel examined the wound. It was not deep, but showed signs of early infection. He had used all his antiseptic wipes on himself. All he had left was clean water and fire. He cleaned the wound as thoroughly as possible, then tore strips from his already tattered jumpsuit. The bandage would not stay on Brick's scales properly, so Daniel used his belt and some cordage made from bark to fashion a harness that held the dressing in place. Brick tolerated this with patient confusion, occasionally turning its head to watch what Daniel was doing. When finished, Daniel patted the creature's massive shoulder. We're even now. You saved me. I patch you up. That's how partnerships work. Brick's scales lightened to their palest shade. Then the creature lowered its head and very gently bumped against Daniel's chest. Once, twice, 3 times, Daniel wrapped his arms around Brick's thick neck and held on. For the first time since crashing on this nightmare planet, he felt something other than the desperate need to survive, that he felt hope. 6 months after Daniel crashed on a planet, a long-range probe detected something impossible. Doctor Lyra studied the data feed for the 3rd time, her 4 compound eyes processing information faster than most species could blink. The readings came from Habitat 7, the Confederation's most notorious disposal world. Class-9 designation. Unsurvivable. A place where they sent the worst criminals, not as punishment, but as quick execution. Nothing lived on Habitat 7 for more than a few days. The ecosystem itself was hostile enough to kill even with full technological support. Yet the probe showed clear signs of sustained activity. Fire signatures, water collection, constructed shelter. Either the probe was malfunctioning or something was alive down there. We need to investigate, she told her security team. For soldiers, all from species known for durability. They looked skeptical. Doctor, with respect, Habitat 7 has a 100% mortality rate, the team leader said. His name was Gron, a thick-skinned species from a heavy gravity world. Whatever the probe detected, it's probably just equipment failure. Then we confirm the failure and return home, Lyra said firmly. Prepare the shuttle. The descent through Habitat 7's atmosphere made everyone nervous. The green clouds were acidic enough to damage their shuttle's outer plating. The 2 suns created temperature extremes. The scanner showed life signs everywhere, massive predators that made even Gron uncomfortable. They landed 2 kilometers from the probe's target coordinates and proceeded on foot. Full environmental suits, weapons charged, every sensor active. The forest was worse than briefings suggested. The black trees twisted in ways that seemed deliberately threatening. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. Twice they spotted predators large enough to flatten their shuttle. Then they found the camp. Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing, unable to process what she was seeing. Someone had built a sophisticated shelter from local materials and salvage pod parts. A water collection system fed into carved stone basins. Drying racks held strips of meat. A fire pit showed recent use. Crude but effective tools hung from hooks. This is not possible, Gron whispered. Spread out, Lyra ordered. Find whoever built this. Carefully. They survived here for months. They are clearly dangerous. The security team moved into the forest. Lyra examined the camp more closely. The craftsmanship spoke of intelligence and adaptation. Whoever this was, they had learned to thrive in an environment that should have killed them in days. A shout from the forest made her turn. Contact! Moving fast, Lyra ran toward the sound, her 6 legs carrying her quickly over the rough ground. She found her team pointing weapons at shadows between trees. Something was out there, moving through the undergrowth with practiced ease. Hold fire, she commanded. Identify your target first. They caught a glimpse of movement. A figure, definitely humanoid, moving from cover to cover. The team pursued, but the figure stayed ahead. It knew this forest, knew every path and hiding spot. The security team was loud and clumsy by comparison, crashing through unfamiliar terrain. Corner it near the rock formation, Gron ordered. The team spread out, trying to use numbers to their advantage. They herded the figure toward a dead end, a vertical cliff face with no obvious escape. The security team closed in, weapons ready. Lyra hung back, watching. The figure stood in shadow, impossible to see clearly. Then something else emerged from the undergrowth behind them. Something massive. Gron saw it first. Contact, rear. Big contact. The creature was enormous, easily 3 times the mass of their largest team member. 6 legs, armored scales, crystalline teeth that caught the light. A predator of the highest order. And it was positioning itself between the security team and the humanoid figure. Fall back. Lyra ordered. One soldier panicked and fired. The energy bolt struck the creature's shoulder. It roared, a sound that made the ground vibrate. The creature surged forward, and the security team scattered in terror. In the chaos, Lyra saw the humanoid figure move to the creature's side. Not running away, moving toward it. The figure placed a hand on the creature's flank, and impossibly, the predator calmed slightly. Then both disappeared into the forest. The security team regrouped near the shuttle, shaken and confused. They had lost their target and nearly died in the process. What was that? Gron demanded. Who runs toward a predator? Lyra thought hard. The pieces were forming a picture she could barely believe. A crash pod in the record from 6 months ago. A human prisoner, presumed dead. A camp showing long-term survival. And now a humanoid figure with a trained predator. Pull the prisoner transport records from 6 months ago, she ordered. Any incidents near Habitat 7. The data came back quickly. 1 pod jettisoned during a riot. Prisoner designation, Daniel Ross. Human. The pod's trajectory put it on a collision course with Habitat 7. Status, deceased, confirmed by crash impact data. The human is alive, Lyra said slowly. And he bonded with an apex predator. Humans are from Earth, correct? Gron asked. Yes. Doctor, what is Earth's planetary classification? Lyra checked her database. Her eyes widened. Class 7 Deathworld. High gravity, extreme weather, aggressive megafauna, toxic plant life, dangerous microbiology. The team stared at her. Class 7 was considered barely survivable. Most species required extensive genetic modification just to visit Earth. And humans evolved there naturally. Send a message to the camp, Lyra said. No weapons, peaceful contact. If he survived 6 months on Habitat 7 with no equipment, he deserves our respect. They set up a communication relay near the humans' camp. Lyra recorded a message explaining they meant no harm, that they came to investigate probe readings, that she wanted to talk. She left a portable communicator at the camp and withdrew to a safe distance point. 3 hours later, the communicator crackled to life. This is Daniel Ross. The voice was rough, clearly unused to speaking. You shot my friend. Why should I trust you? Your friend will be fine, Lyra said carefully. The injury was minor. I apologize for my team's panic. We did not understand the situation. Silence for a long moment. You're from the Confederation? Yes. Scientific Division. I accessed your case files, Daniel. You were wrongly convicted. The evidence shows this clearly now. More silence. Even if that's true, I'm supposed to be dead. Why are you really here? Because our probe detected impossible things. A human surviving on a Class-9 world. You should not be alive. Yet our sensors show a thriving camp. I had to see for myself. Yeah, well, congratulations. You've seen it. Now, leave me alone. Daniel, wait. I can help you. I can clear your name, get you off this planet. You don't have to live like this. The laugh that came through the communicator was bitter. Live like what? I've got food, water, shelter. I know this place now. It's honest here. Something wants to kill you. It tries. No lies, no corrupt courts, no prosecutors hiding evidence. What about your family? Friends? Your life before? Long pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was quieter. I had a sister. Haven't seen her in 4 years. She probably thinks I'm dead. Maybe that's easier for her. Or maybe, Lyra said gently, she deserves to know you're alive. Maybe you deserve justice. No response. Lyra waited, not pushing. Finally, the communicator crackled again. There's a clearing 1 kilometer northwest of my camp. Big flat rock in the center. Meet me there at dawn tomorrow. Just you. No weapons. And doctor, yes, if anyone shoots at Brick again, we disappear. You'll never find us in this forest. Agreed. Thank you, Daniel. The connection cut. Lyra sat back, her mind racing. Tomorrow she would meet the impossible human. The man who tamed a death world and made friends with apex predators. Part of her was terrified. Most of her was fascinated. All of her wondered what kind of species humans really were beneath the fragile appearance. Dawn on Habitat 7 was always beautiful in a dangerous way. The red sun rose first, painting everything in shades of crimson. Then the yellow sun followed an hour later, shifting the world to gold and orange. Dr. Lyra stood in the clearing, alone as promised, watching the color change and trying not to think about the predators she could hear moving through the forest. Daniel emerged from the tree line so quietly she almost missed him. One moment the forest was empty, the next he was there. Lyra's trained scientific eye cataloged everything immediately. The human looked nothing like his prison transport photo. That Daniel had been soft, slightly overweight from years of sedentary freight work, pale from living in climate-controlled ships. This Daniel was lean and hard, every muscle defined. His skin was dark brown, weathered like old leather. His hair hung past his shoulders in tangled locks. Scars marked his exposed forearms. He wore what remained of a prison jumpsuit, now more patches than original material, and crude sandals made from bark and cordage. But his eyes were what struck Lyra most. They constantly scanned the environment, tracking sounds and movements she could not detect. Alert, aware, alive in a way that city dwellers never managed. Dr. Lyra, Daniel said. His voice was steady, but he maintained distance between them. Daniel, thank you for meeting me. Let's be clear about something first. I didn't survive 6 months on this planet by being stupid or trusting. So convince me why I should believe anything you say. Lyra appreciated the directness. Fair. Let me show you your case files. Everything I accessed. She held up a data tablet, then carefully placed it on the ground between them before backing away. Daniel approached cautiously, picked it up, and began reading. Lyra watched emotions flicker across his face. Anger at seeing the prosecutor's buried evidence. Pain at the injustice. Something that might have been hope. This doesn't change anything, Daniel said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. I'm still a dead man legally. The system marked me deceased, which can be corrected. I have authority to... A rumble from the forest cut her off. Brick emerged from the shadows, moving with that deceptive grace only large predators managed. The creature positioned itself beside Daniel, close enough to touch. This near, Lyra could see the intelligence in those eyes, the obvious bond between human and predator. This is Brick, Daniel said, one hand resting on the creature's scaled flank. He's my friend. Saved my life more times than I can count. Lyra forced herself to remain calm despite every instinct screaming about the danger. May I approach? I would like to examine the wound my team caused. Daniel considered, then nodded. Lyra moved slowly, telegraphing every movement. Up close, Brick was even more impressive. The scales had a crystalline structure she had never seen documented. The musculature spoke of incredible strength, and that intelligence in the eyes was undeniable. The wound on Brick's shoulder was minor, already healing. Daniel had treated it with some kind of local plant paste that actually seemed to be working as an antiseptic. Impressive field medicine. How did this happen? Lyra asked softly, not just meaning the wound, but the entire impossible situation. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I was alone and scared. Brick was curious. I shared food. He brought kills. We helped each other survive. It wasn't complicated. We just paid attention to each other. Most species would never attempt what you did. Apex predators are apex for a reason. Brick's not just a predator. He's smart, maybe smarter than some people I've met. And he understands loyalty. Daniel scratched behind one of Brick's front legs. The creature's scales lightened, clearly enjoying the attention. Look, Doctor, why are you really here? The Confederation doesn't send scientists to rescue dead convicts. You are correct. Initially, we came to investigate probe anomalies. But once I saw what you achieved here, my mission changed. Lyra chose her words carefully. The Confederation has no record of anyone surviving long-term on a Class-9 world. Ever. You're unique. The scientific implications alone are remarkable. So I'm a research subject now. No, you are a person who deserves justice and the chance to go home. Lyra posed it, but I will be honest. Your survival here challenges everything we thought we knew about habitability and adaptation. If you were willing to share your knowledge, it could save lives. Rescue operations, colony establishment, scientific expeditions to hostile worlds. You learn things no one else knows. Daniel looked at Brick, seemed to have a silent conversation with the creature, then back to Lyra. What about Brick? Any offer you make has to include him. Include him how? He comes with me. Non negociable. I'm not leaving him here alone. Lyra's mind raced through regulations and protocols. Transporting an apex predator from a Class-9 world is not standard procedure. There are quarantine requirements, safety assessments, containment protocols. Then we stay here. Daniel's voice was flat. Final. Wait. Let me think. Lyra paced, her 6 legs carrying her in a tight circle. The human had leverage and knew it. But more importantly, he was right. The bond between them was real. Separating them would be cruel and scientifically wasteful. If I could arrange it, would you agree to return to Confederation space? Your name cleared, compensation provided, and Brick recognized as a registered companion animal under your care. Companion animal? Daniel almost smiled. He's 2 tons of armored murder machine, who is clearly bonded to you and responds to your guidance. We have legal frameworks for this. It will require documentation and testimony, but it is possible. Daniel studied her for a long moment. What's the catch? You need to work with me. Share what you learned here. Help develop better survival protocols. Possibly train rescue specialists or consult on Deathworld operations. I cannot promise it would be easy, but it would be meaningful work. And I'd be free, not a prisoner or a test subject, completely free, with full legal status restored and financial compensation for wrongful conviction. You would be employed as a consultant, well paid, with full autonomy over your choices. Brick rumbled, a questioning sound. Daniel placed both hands on the creature's broad head. What do you think, buddy? Want to see the galaxy? Brick's scales shifted through several colors, then settled on a warm gray-blue. The creature bumped its head against Daniel's chest gently. He says yes, Daniel translated, or at least he trusts me to make the right call. Is that a yes from you as well? Daniel looked around the clearing, at the forest that tried to kill him and became his home. 6 months ago, I would have done anything to get off this planet. But now, he shook his head. This place taught me things about myself, about what I'm capable of, about what matters. You can carry those lessons with you, Lyra said quietly. Yeah, I suppose I can. Daniel took a deep breath. Okay, yes, but I have conditions. First, Brick stays with me always. Second, I want to take seeds and samples from here. This ecosystem is brutal but balanced. There's knowledge here worth preserving. Third, I want regular communication access to my sister once we're back in range. All reasonable. Agreed. And fourth, if at any point I feel like I'm being treated as a prisoner or experiment instead of a person, I walk. No questions, no stops. Deal. Lyra extended her foreleg in the Confederation gesture of agreement. Daniel reached out and clasped it with his hand. His grip was strong, calloused, the hand of someone who worked hard to survive. "Deal," Lyra said. "Welcome back to civilization, Daniel Ross. Though I suspect civilization is about to get a very interesting lesson about what humans can do." Daniel laughed, the first genuine laugh Lyra had heard from him. "Doctor, they have no idea. Wait until they learn where humans come from. Class-9 Deathworld. We grew up in a place almost as bad as this. We just forgot it because we built cities and ships and convinced ourselves we were fragile." Lyra looked at the human, at his bonded predator, at the camp he built with his hands and determination. She thought about Earth, a Class-7 world that produced a species capable of this. The galaxy was going to be very surprised, and possibly quite concerned. But mostly, Lyra suspected they were going to be amazed, just like she was. The video went viral across 17 star systems in under 48 hours. Daniel had not expected that. He stood in a sterile quarantine observation room, watching news feeds on multiple screens, trying to process what he was seeing. Someone on Dr. Lyra's team had leaked footage. Daniel walking through Habitat 7's forest with Brick beside him like an oversized loyal dog. Daniel demonstrating his water filtration system. Daniel casually handling plants that were documented as toxic to every known species. The final clip showed Daniel and Brick taking down one of the segmented predators together, working in perfect coordination. The Confederation net exploded with reactions. Scientists analyzing every frame. Politicians demanding investigations. Regular citizens split between fascination and fear. Humans became the topic of every discussion. Where they came from, what else they could do, whether they were dangerous. The prosecutor who buried Daniel's evidence suddenly faced intense scrutiny. His career imploded within a week. Other cases were being reviewed. Reform movements gained momentum. Daniel's wrongful conviction became the symbol of everything wrong with Confederation justice. Daniel did not care about any of it. He sat with Brick in their shared quarantine space, surrounded by scientists who wanted to study them, lawyers who wanted to represent them, and media representatives who wanted interviews. Dr. Lyra ran interference, letting through only what was absolutely necessary. "Your exoneration is official," Lyra said, entering the observation room with a data tablet. "Full pardon, all records cleared." The Confederation also agreed to a settlement. Quite substantial, actually. "You will never need to work again if you choose not to." "What about Brick?" Daniel asked immediately. "Certified as a registered companion animal under your legal guardianship. He passed all behavioral assessments. The evaluators were terrified but impressed. He is calm, responsive to your commands, and shows no aggression unless you are threatened. They have never seen anything like him." Brick rumbled contentedly from where he lay sprawled across a reinforced platform. The quarantine room had been expanded twice to accommodate his size. The creature seemed unbothered by all the attention, as long as Daniel stayed close. "We can leave soon," Lyra continued. "Quarantine requirements are nearly complete. But before we do, I need to ask, have you thought about what comes next?" Daniel had thought about little else. Going home meant returning to a life that no longer fit. His apartment was gone, belongings disposed of when he was presumed dead. His job certainly no longer existed. His sister had held a memorial service. "How did you walk back into that?" "I got a message from my sister," Daniel said quietly. "Through your office. She saw the footage. She's crying in the video, happy tears, but also angry that I was put through this. She wants to see me." "That is good, yes." "It is. It really is." Daniel scratched behind Brick's foreleg, a gesture that had become automatic. "But after that, I don't know how to go back to a normal life. I spent 6 months learning to read predator behavior and identify edible plants. Not exactly useful skills in a city. Which brings me to an offer." Lyra settled herself on a chair designed for her species. The Confederation is forming a new division: hostile environment response and training. They need someone to develop survival protocols for extreme conditions. Someone who actually survived what should be unsurvivable. You want to teach people how to not die on death worlds. Essentially, yes. But more than that, rescue operations fail constantly because our teams cannot function in truly hostile environments. Colony establishments fail because we underestimate planetary dangers. Scientists die on research missions because protocols do not account for reality. You could change that. Daniel considered. I'm not a scientist or a soldier. No, you're something more valuable. You are someone who adapted and thrived with nothing but determination and intelligence. That is what we need. What does it pay? Daniel asked, then laughed at himself. Sorry, strange question after months of bartering with mushrooms. Lyra named a figure that made Daniel blink. That much. You are unique. The only proven long-term Deathworld survivor without technological support. Your knowledge is literally priceless. This is fair compensation. And Brick comes with me everywhere. In fact, I suspect you will become part of the training program. Imagine teaching people to read predator behavior with an actual apex predator as demonstration. Brick lifted his head at the sound of his name, scales shifting to curious blue-gray. Daniel met the creature's eyes. 6 months of survival together had taught him to read those expressions. Brick was interested. Okay, Daniel said. I'll do it, but I want to visit my sister first. And I need time to figure out how to exist in civilization again. I've been eating roasted mushrooms and fish for half a year. Pretty sure a restaurant menu is going to overwhelm me. Lyra's mandibles clicked in what Daniel had learned was amusement. Take all the time you need. The position will wait. 3 weeks later, Daniel stood in a park on a mid-level station, watching his sister run toward him. She looked older than he remembered, more gray in her hair. She hit him like a missile, sobbing into his shoulder. They held each other for a long time, not talking, just reconnecting. When she finally pulled back, she looked at Brick. The massive predator sat patiently nearby, watching the reunion with calm interest. That's him, she asked. That's Brick. Yeah, don't worry. He's gentle unless I'm in danger. Then he's terrifying. She approached carefully. Brick lowered his head to her level. She reached out a shaking hand and touched his snout. Brick's scales lightened, accepting the touch. He's beautiful, she whispered, in a deadly, alien sort of way. I can see why you two bonded. They spent the day catching up. Daniel told her everything, holding nothing back. The crash, the survival, the fear, the adaptation, the bond with Brick. She told him about the memorial service, about her anger at the Confederation, about her joy at seeing him alive. What now? She asked as the day wound down. What does Daniel Ross do after becoming galactic famous? I'm going to help people not die on dangerous planets. Train rescue teams. Develop better protocols. Maybe save some lives. He smiled. And I'm going to do it with my best friend at my side. She hugged him again. I'm so proud of you. You survived something impossible and came out stronger. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. The months that followed were busy. Daniel's first training program attracted specialists from 40 different species. He taught them to read environments, to think like prey and predator simultaneously, to adapt rather than impose. Brick became an unexpected teaching assistant. The massive predator demonstrated behavior patterns while Daniel explained them. Trainees who initially feared Brick learned to respect and understand him. Success stories started coming in. A rescue team used Daniel's protocols to extract scientists from a collapsing research station on a Class-6 world. A colony survived its first year on a hostile planet by implementing his environmental reading techniques. Rescue operation survival rates improved by 40%. Daniel received awards he did not care about and recognition he never sought. What mattered was the message from a rescue team leader thanking him because his training saved 3 lives. The letter from a colonist who survived a predator attack using principles Daniel taught. The scientist who credited his protocols for successful field work on a previously impossible world. One evening, Daniel sat in his apartment, larger now and modified for Brick's needs. The creature dozed on a custom platform while Daniel reviewed reports. A message came through from Dr. Lyra. Another planet, another situation. Class, 8 Deathworld. A crashed ship with survivors. Local rescue teams were failing. They wanted Daniel's help, that he looked at Brick. The creature opened one eye, already sensing Daniel's shift in mood. Those months on Habitat 7 created a connection deeper than words. Brick knew what the message meant. Adventure. Danger. Purpose. Brick's scales shifted to the bright blue-gray that meant excitement. Ready, Daniel smiled and accepted the mission. This was his life now. Not the safe, comfortable existence of a freight hauler. Something better. Something that mattered. Using what that terrible, beautiful Deathworld taught him to help others survive their own impossible situations, that he was Daniel Ross. He fell from a sky onto a planet designed to kill him and walked away with a tan and his best friend. The galaxy thought that made him special. Maybe it did. Or maybe it just proved what humans could do when they stopped doubting themselves and started adapting. Either way, he had work to do. People to save. Lessons to teach. And a 2-ton armored predator who would follow him anywhere, because that was what friends did. The galaxy was full of dangerous places. Good thing humanity specialized in surviving them. And even better that Daniel was no longer alone in proving it.